And I think Agile can't really scale without DevOps. So for DevOps to work, you need to apply it to the entire value stream, which maybe will extend beyond the development teams, right? And so this is where business agility comes in. And it's essential for people in different parts of the value stream to be able to have meaningful conversations with each other. And they can do that only if they understand each other's domain. And this is why one of the core Agile 2 principles is that people need to understand how their technology, business people need to understand how their technology is built and delivered so that they can have these conversations effectively. I'm going to pause a second just to see if there's any questions in the chat. I don't see anything there. So I will keep going. Okay. So now I'm going to shift a little and talk about the group of people who got together to create the ideas of Agile 2. They're from all parts of the world. We have lots of different skill sets and areas of expertise. We come from different backgrounds. And around when the pandemic began, Cliff Berg, who had been thinking about a lot of these things, decided to form a group of people to essentially hold a retrospective on Agile, to come together and talk about what are we concerned about in the Agile space and how can we improve it. We didn't really set out to create a new Agile manifesto. It sort of emerged from our conversations. And so over a period of 8 months, we met and we debated every Agile topic you could imagine and examined them really deeply and tried to come up with better ways of articulating ideas that we had read about or experienced in our work or had seen emerge in the Agile community, but that hadn't been written down. And so in a lot of ways, we didn't really invent this, but in some ways you could say that just the act of sitting down and articulating something clearly can actually be a significant contribution, even if each individual idea isn't brand new by itself. And for those of you who've seen my past talks, this next part of these slides will look a little familiar, but I think this concept here is so important that it bears repeating. So what I'm going to do next is talk a little bit about the original manifesto and what we tried to do when we were creating a new set of values and principles. So the original Agile manifesto is very balanced. It wasn't extreme. There is a very important caveat that often gets overlooked. While there is value in the items on the right, we value the items on the left more. And if you think about that in a literal sense, you could change this wording and you could say, there is value in comprehensive documentation, right? Because there is value in the items on the right. We just value working software more. But there is value in comprehensive documentation. So there was balance in the original manifesto. And I think what happened over time was that the interpretation of the meaning of the values in the Agile community got a little off balance. And so people saw the word over and interpreted that to be really extreme. And they interpreted that to mean that processes and tools are bad and individuals and interactions are good. And the caveat gets overlooked so often that people ignore it altogether or they just forget about it. And the statement that there is value in the items on the right gets lost. And here's some random examples of visualizations of the Agile values. The first one on the top left emphasizes the items on the left, and also the caveat is missing. The next one at least has arrows, the one below it, but it doesn't have the caveat. And on the right, we see that these two graphics have just dropped the items on the right because, at least graphically, they were implying that they really don't matter and that only things on the left really matter. And how this plays out sometimes is when people try to create a new manifesto in a different topic area or domain area, and they carry over this misunderstanding so that the new manifesto has items on the left that are good and items on the right that are clearly bad, things we don't want. And for example, the marketing manifesto has obvious polarities and presents good and bad ideas as opposites, and the caveat is missing. In the personal agility manifesto, there is a caveat, but the caveat has lost the idea of balance. And it also makes it very clear that the items on the right are bad. Now, we didn't discover this, right? The dark manifesto makes fun of this by flipping the values around and making the entire thing rigid and extreme. And the caveat itself is rewritten to say there is no value in the items on the right. And, this came out in 2012. So this isn't new. This isn't a news flash. What we tried to do with Agile 2 was to address this problem head on. And we realized as we went through this 8 months of conversation and intense debate in Google Docs and Slack and going back and forth, we realized that we needed to come up with a better way to explain our philosophy so that this kind of misunderstanding didn't happen.